I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. It is long overdue, but I am now actively working on a book. And one of the paragraphs that I recently wrote really highlights a message from my next guest. And it goes like this. The future of leadership is human. In an era where AI can do the tasks, what remains uniquely ours is how we show up. Walking your talk isn't optional. It's the only sustainable strategy. When people thrive, cultures flourish. And when leaders model what they ask of others, they don't just get better results. They build places where people belong, grow, and evolve. That kind of energy is irreplaceable. And that kind of culture is the future. Jamie Henriod is my next guest, and she is truly one of a kind. She spent several years as chief of staff to Tony Hsieh during his tenure as CEO of Zappos, working shoulder to shoulder with a true pioneer of company culture and customer service. Jamie wasn't just an implementer of Tony's ideas, she was a co-creator. Together, they developed ideas and practices that transformed how we think about customer service and workplace culture. Zappos still to this day remains a gold standard to how we see culture and customer service. In this interview, Jamie shares timeless stories and powerful insights that continue to inspire. A trusted advisor to CEOs and boards of directors, Jamie has led people strategy, organizational culture, and employee engagement programs that drive both business success and meaningful workplace connections. With a career rooted in both employee experience and customer service, Jamie understands that a thriving culture and a thriving workplace directly impacts customer satisfaction. Her expertise spans people strategy, internal and external communications, and the alignment of company values with exceptional customer service. A recognized thought leader and sought-after speaker, Jamie shares actionable insights on leadership, company culture, and the intersection of employee and customer experience. Whether discussing strategies for building resilient teams, fostering meaningful workplace connections, or enhancing service through strong organizational values, Jamie delivers compelling, real-world advice that inspires and transforms. Jamie Henriod on the Leadovation podcast. Jamie, it is a real pleasure having you on this show. You and I have been talking about doing this for, I think, maybe 2 years. Yeah. It's been a long time, and I finally got you on here. And, we're friends. We've worked together, with a nonprofit that we're both in love with. And I know that there was a topic that you presented once that had to do with this relationship between internal culture, i.e. internal customer service, and its relationship to the experience that our customers and our community feel. And I thought it was brilliant. And I thought you did such a great job of that. And it just struck a huge chord because I truly believe that if we don't walk our talk, we are out of not only kilter internally, but externally. And so I'd love to have you start riffing on this relationship between internal culture and external customer experience.
Yeah, I'd love to. Give the audience some background on the talk that you mentioned. I worked for Zappos.com for just around 16 years. And for 10 of those years, I was the chief of staff to our CEO, Tony Hsieh. So I learned from almost the beginning of my career the importance of customer service, both externally and internally to your employee base. The talk that you saw was a legacy talk I developed. Some people might be aware Tony passed away a little over 4 years ago. And so this was my kind of talk to honor all of the things I learned, not all of the things, like 10 of the things I learned from him in my 16 years working with him. So it was a great honor of mine to be able to share that talk with you and the team. So yeah, where do you want to dive in?
Well, yeah. So what was it? I mean, as I remember you talking about, and I think that we all sort of knew, but you did such a great job of describing that what Zappos was about and what Tony created and you created was not only kind of a revolutionary way to treat your customers, and you had some insane stories, which I think we should hear about,
Yeah, I'd love to
like people
share.
staying on phone calls for hours taking care of some of these customer requirements. But that
Yeah,
wasn't where it stopped. It was also something that took place internal. There was a kind of fun that took place and family that people seem to really want to work at Zappos because of that environment. So there was both happening at the same time. So talk about some of those internal experiences and some of the external experiences. And then I'm also curious, like how did you all design this? I mean,
yeah.
this doesn't happen just out of like, oh, happenstance. This was planned. How did you plan it? So first give us some examples and then how did you figure out how to do it?
Yeah, I think the overarching philosophy that we had was that you have to lead by example, right? So if you want your team to provide outstanding customer service to your customers, you really need to start with providing outstanding service to your employees. You have to show them what that looks like, right? And then, so we internally treated everything in terms of that customer relationship. So when I started my career at Zappos, I was in human resources. So it was very easy, right? The customer is the employee. And if the processes we're creating makes it hard on the employee, then we're doing a really bad job of servicing our customer. And the same thing applies with the customer service team and how they're working with our actual customers that are purchasing our products. How we got there is a longer story, and it is several steps, but it started with defining our core values and really understanding who we were and who we want to be. And at the time, when I started at Zappos, it was 2004. I think it was, in my opinion, it was revolutionary, the stuff that we were doing. And we got a lot of, coverage about that and a lot of attention about everything that we were doing. And now it seems maybe not so revolutionary, but I still see employers struggle with it all the time. But really, when we were defining what our values were, it wasn't so much about hiring copycats of each other. We didn't want the same personality over and over again. What we were trying to hire is people who shared our values so that they could then spread those values. It's a lot easier to provide great customer service if that's sort of innate to your personality, right? Like that's something you care about. And some of our other core values, core value number 10 was be humble. And that showed up in a lot of different ways, including how flat our organization was, not having extra perks for executives that regular employees didn't have. But that core value was hard for some people to live when they were hired and maybe came in as a VP. So they've been VPs elsewhere. They've had other experiences. They're used to certain things. And then they come to Zappos and we're like, we all get our hands dirty here. None of us have an office. We're all sitting in cubicles with everybody else. And you could see those values become an issue the longer that they worked there.
Did
I
you
think,
find that some people were attracted to the values that you espoused because they wanted to have that be a part of their life. It wasn't quite there. It was a latent um, desire to be that way, but they hadn't fully become that. Because I'm seeing that with another organization right now, that people are really attracted to this other organization for their values and what they stand for and their vision, their mission. And yet I think that there probably would, you would say, some people would say, I'm not quite there yet. I don't quite internalize that yet. I want to, I hope to someday. And maybe if I step into this company and put on the coat called the company values, it will begin to wear off on me.
Yeah.
And does that work? Can we do that? Can we expect that? Or do we need to find people who already completely own and embody the values, and that's who we should find? And if you're not 100% there, I'm sorry, you're not a good fit.
That is a hard question, and I think the answer is, well, at least for us, we weren't looking for people that were perfect in every one of those values, because some of the values can conflict in different points of your day and your life, right? And what we were looking for is people who were not necessarily opposed to those values. They didn't contradict anything in them. One of the ways we evaluated this, we had a whole process on during hiring to kind of weed some of this out. So we had a culture interview, so to speak, or a core values interview. But we also did core value reviews every year, and you would rank like how you think you did in each area, each of the 10 values, and then your peers and your boss would do the same for you. And what you would see, and it wasn't just like, is this person humble? You know, one of our values, deliver wow through service. Does this person deliver wow through service? Like, we created 20 questions, 2 questions per value, that we would ask. And then those correlated to each value. And when you would get your report at the review time, it would say, okay, you're 86% on deliver wow through service, and you are 72% on be humble, you are 90% on be fun and a little weird. And so it's not like you suck at this and you're great at this. It's more like you have more strengths in these areas, less in these, but you wouldn't be here if you were so bad. Like, you wouldn't, if you were opposed to this. And then we could look and say, okay, be fun and a little weird is a value I need to work on this year. You know, maybe I need to step out of my comfort zone, or I need to try new things. You would come up with a plan on how you were going to and it wasn't like, you know, we weren't holding your feet to the fire. It's more just an exercise.
Well, how did you said you created a percentage, you know, like a 87% on this or 28% on that. How did you get to the percentage of something that was around a value? Or was it through interviews of other people and you had to rank that person on a scale of 1 to 10? How did you come up with those percentages?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to tell you the best that I can is that from what I recall, because it's been more than 5 years at this point since I left Zappos, but from what I recall, it was the way you would rank it. It was like, say the question is this person goes above and beyond for their coworkers, right? It would say always displays this behavior, sometimes displays this behavior, rarely. So that must have equaled something. And then on the back,
numerically,
they were pushing those numbers through.
Okay, understood.
One year, and we can end on this, but I just thought it was really funny, is one year HR gave us a T-shirt with the value we got the highest in. And so everyone was wearing T-shirts, and they would walk around and you'd be like, really? That, embrace and drive change. You're like really good at that.
That's great.
So there's 10 different, shirts for the 10 values.
That's great. I love it. Because I think when people get these value statements, we see them on our walls. We just don't really have a lot of energy to really live them and really bring them into conversation. So I love this evaluation of the values relative to that person. I heard a myth, and tell me if this is right, because I think there's such folklore around Zappos, and I don't even know whether this story is true or not. But so I heard this story that a group of people are going to go to the home office to be interviewed, and they don't know each other. They're just on a bus, and there's a bus driver driving toward the location. I guess it's Hendersonville, correct?
It was Henderson,
Was
but
okay. All right.
they
So
were in downtown. Yeah,
outside of
downtown Las
Vegas at the time.
Vegas. Yeah.
So the bus driver's just doing his thing, and these people don't know each other, and it's a kind of a long drive, and so they're beginning to kind of like, what do you do, and blah blah blah. Oh, you're here for this, okay, and they start to chat with each other, and it's just normal kind of killing time chit chat, and but then they get to the location, and they go into this room, they sit down, and then the bus driver goes to another room. Tell me if this is true or not, and talks
Okay.
about what he heard. And based on these little informal, relaxed conversations, he'd go back and say, you, and you can stay. You, and you need to go. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Is that true or not? I just don't
Okay.
know.
That is somewhat true,
Okay.
but not completely. And
All right.
I'll explain why.
So the bus
The
driver was not necessarily the HR director or not necessarily the
no,
recruitment person.
the,
Okay. Okay.
the shuttle, we did have a shuttle service because we had lots of vendors and things coming into town. So we would pick, because we were known for customer service, what's better customer service than picking up your vendor from the airport, making
Oh,
them not
wow.
have to think about that, right? So,
Yeah.
but if we were flying in candidates for recruitment, they would be picked up as well. And I think what most of those people didn't know is that the shuttle driver was a Zappos employee. They weren't, their job was a shuttle driver.
Right. Okay.
But they were employed by Zappos. And we would follow up, we being HR, the recruiters would follow up with the shuttle driver and the front desk person. And we would say, hey, this candidate came through today. Do you have any feedback? And so we weren't like, they weren't hired spies, but
Understood.
sometimes you find people that don't always treat the shuttle driver and the receptionist the same way they would treat the HR director.
Understood.
We definitely don't want that person in,
Right.
because if
Yeah.
you like, everybody is your customer at Zappos.
Yes.
So you can't have different treatment for what you perceive to be an important person versus what you perceive to not be an important person. So we would weed that out, but it wasn't as sneaky as you.
Okay. But if that person who was a shuttle bus driver and said, yeah, I heard some stuff and they didn't treat me very well, they didn't treat the front desk person very well, that might be just enough to say thanks, but no thanks.
It would be enough. But if
It
it
would
was
be enough.
super egregious, or even just rude, that would be enough for us to say that this person's probably not a fit.
And I'm thinking about, so if people are listening to this, think about how many times people are hired into your company because of their resume, not because of their culture.
Yeah.
And I have been involved with so many different coaching engagements over the years where people say, yeah, this person was a rock star somewhere else. But now that they're here, we're having some culture issues. And can you help us out with that? And I keep telling them, you should be hiring for culture, not just for resume. Make sure that's part of your process. All right. So thank you for finally, clarifying or getting to the truth about this story that I've been holding on for a long, long time in my head. So I got it partially right, not completely right.
Yes, partially right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's another internal story that you could share about what the culture was like being an employee? And then I want to go to the other side of the fence, which is the customer experience. That's a little unusual. That's not your normal run-of-the-mill kind of culture activity or the way people were treated or the processes that were so connected to, employee experience. I mean, anything that kind of comes to mind would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was so much that we did, and I think that was what made us stand out and what attracted people to our organization. And let me tell you, the most powerful recruiting tool Zappos ever had was our culture, right? When I started, everybody thought we were, like, I would say to my family, oh, I work for Zappos. And they say, oh, Zippo, like the lighter. And I was like, no, no one had heard of us. And
Yeah.
so we would have to like beg people to work for us. And then when we hit like Fortune Best Companies to Work For, like they were banging down our doors. We never had a position that didn't have hundreds of applicants.
Yeah.
So I think maybe some of the surprising things that you would discover when you became an employee or when you were going through the process is 100% of our employees were trained on being a call center employee. It was the most important job in the company. It is the only job that had direct access to the customer. So 100% of employees had to be trained on how to handle phone calls. And so that started with full month of training. But when you signed to join our company, the first month you were a call center employee. You worked 40 hours a week for 4 weeks, getting
No
trained. And then
matter whether you're a VP or not.
no matter what, even Tony, our CEO, had to do the training when we decided to implement it. And then every year during the holiday season, when it's super busy, every employee had to spend 10 hours a year on the phone talking with customers. And we weren't super good at it. It was hard. I would get on the phone in December and they give us a little flag, a Mylar flag that makes noise. And I would hold on to that flag and I would answer, thank you for calling Zappos. This is Jamie. And then sure enough, the first question I'd be like, oh, come help me. And I'd wave the flag and a trainer would run over and help me with the call. But yeah, it was hard. It was definitely an exercise, but it kept us so close to the customer, and the
Yeah.
amount of the speed at which things improved once we started putting every employee into the call center first. It was light speed. When you put an engineer, you said to an engineer, you now have to help the customer with the tool you built. And then
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
like, this doesn't make sense. Why do
Right.
I have to push 7 buttons to have this one thing happen? And then they would be done with their hours. They'd go back to their desk and all of a sudden what took 15 minutes now takes 20 seconds.
Well, I'm thinking about like other companies, Jamie, like who are not call center focused the way Zappos
Mhm.
was and is. Let's say a healthcare organization. We've got experience in some of that. You do as well. That you have such many layers, and you have corporate offices, and you've got so many structures involved. I mean, I know they talk about doing rounds.
Mhm.
The CEO and the head of this department of that department going out and probably meeting with other care providers, but not necessarily patients. But that's a time commitment, and when you've got all these other pressures that you have to adhere to, then the question that I'm sure in people's minds is, what's the ROI of me taking a half a day to go to these sites? Or I'm working for a large construction company, and what's the ROI for me to go out and actually be on the site where they're building that building, when they're building that house, and to be able to meet those people who are doing that? I mean, so what is your answer to that sort of objection that I know people have? They wonder, is there going to be any value to me doing this other than the fact that I get to meet some people and I get to, shake some hands, and that's nice in and of itself. But in the end, do we all benefit from that?
I mean, 1,000%. I can answer that. I mean, I can't prove it to
That's a
you.
softball question, by the way, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
get your thoughts on it.
But so while you were saying it, I was looking up one of my favorite quotes that Tony used to say, because I didn't want to mess it up, but it's about ROI. And it's just because you can't measure the ROI of something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. What's the ROI of hugging your mom?
Yeah, I remember you saying that. That's so
And
great.
I, and basically the intention is like, sometimes you do things because they feel good, right? Like you hug
Yeah.
your mom because it feels good to hug your mom, and your mom likes to be hugged. So you do it.
Yeah.
And this, I don't think necessarily relates as much to like the question you just asked about getting out and doing rounds and being on the floor as it does some of the sillier things that we did. Like, why did you throw so many events for your employees? Like,
Mm.
can't measure the ROI, but you know what? They were really happy. They really enjoyed coming to work every day. So can I tie that through data? Maybe not, but I
Right.
like, we all have a gut that can say that being nice, has rewards. But I love that you brought up a hospital example because it reminded me of something that actually happened in a hospital. I had all three of my children at the same hospital in Las Vegas. Shout out to St. Rose on Eastern in Henderson, Nevada. But I had all three of my kids there, and there's a big range between my kids. There's 15 years in between two of them. So the third baby I had, they put so many bracelets on me. And I know that they're trying to like keep the baby safe, keep the mom safe. You got your medications. I don't even know all the stuff that my bracelets told the staff around me. But I remember for the 3 days I was in there, I was so uncomfortable with these bracelets. They hurt. There were so
Mm.
many of them. They were hard plastic. Like, it was just awful. And I was super lucky because the CEO at the time happened to be a friend of mine. And so he called me afterwards and said, like, how did everything go? And I said, you know what? Everything was amazing. But those bracelets made me want to like not be there anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I remember them coming in and cut, like, not even the IV bothered me as much as these bracelets.
Wow.
And so I guess my point is that because the CEO called me and we were friends, he got this piece of information that he might not have had otherwise. So you either have to have many, many touch points with your customers directly, or you need to be so careful and curate an environment where feedback is given and valued and acted upon, so that the
Mm.
nurse that's going into to talk with the new mom notices how uncomfortable the mom is with all the bracelets, and talks to the purchasing team about, don't buy these bracelets anymore. It's like, I had a C-section, and I remember the whole time thinking the worst part of this whole thing was these bracelets. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how bad the
What?
bracelets
What?
were.
You're
And
kidding.
so yeah, I don't want to belabor this.
No, but I get that's a great story, though. It's a great story.
I have another small one. This is not actually from
Please. Yeah.
Zappos, but this was from Southwest Airlines a million years ago. I was lucky enough to meet with their culture team, and they said to me that they had an issue with morale in this like one hub, and they couldn't figure it out. So they were like, let's throw a barbecue, and everyone shows up in their Hawaiian shirts and they're like barbecuing, and it's like really nice, right? And the team is like, this is awesome, but their morale still didn't improve. And like, finally someone's like, did anyone ask? Like, do you just ask them what's the matter? And so the team went and they said, like, what's going on, guys? You guys don't look super happy based off of these things. And the team is like, you know what really is hard? It's hard that our ice machine is broken. And every time a plane comes in, we have to run and grab ice from a whole different area to get this plane turned around and on time. And the issue was an ice machine. And it's like, sometimes the answer is so simple, but you have to create
Yeah.
an environment where you can ask the questions and you can get those honest answers. And I think the only way you can do that is if you are constantly taking the feedback and showing movement,
And
so they don't
listening.
get exhausted by it falling
Yeah.
on deaf ears.
Yeah. We think that the solution might be one thing and it's completely else. It's something else. We don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what Tony, I think one of my biggest lessons from him is he always just asked why. And he'd be like, why? And then you'd answer. And he was like, why? And we would
Uh,
just keep going through this. And then he's like, that's fix that. Like after the 15th time, he's like, that's the problem. That's what we should be fixing. Everything else is just
So
symptoms.
he's getting a root cause.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just taking the symptom at face value. He wants to challenge it. Talk about
Yeah.
him for a second, because I think the role of the leader in the ability to champion this kind of culture, or any culture, speak to that relationship between culture and the person at the top, if we do have that hierarchical structure. I have some thoughts on it. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Can we have a great culture without a leader that supports it?
I'm going to quote a good friend of mine who always says, culture is started from the ground up and then smashed from the top down. And I have seen that to be the case many, many times.
Hmm.
Also, Tony used to say that he is the architect of the greenhouse, right? He creates an environment where the plants can thrive. He doesn't tell the plants how to thrive. He doesn't say you should grow in this direction or that direction. You should bloom at this time or that time. He's like, I'm just going to create an environment where it's warm and cozy and everybody has what they need to do their job. And then I'm going to let them do their job. And
Hmm.
I think that was his role. And, you know, I will can it exist outside of him? I think the story of Zappos is still unfolding. I don't know what the answer to that is,
Hmm.
but he was really important in creating an environment where everybody felt responsible for the culture and everybody was always looking out for each other in that environment.
Understood. Yeah. Well, speak to the other side of the fence, the customer side. Has it got any great stories to share? And I guess
So
I'm trying to knit these together at some point, right?
yeah,
So I think you once told me a
I'll bring it
story about
home
the
for
wedding
you,
story.
Gene.
What's
The
that?
what?
The
I said I
wedding
can bring it
story?
home. The
Is there
wedding
a wedding
story.
story?
There's lots of
Somebody
them.
having a wedding?
There was a story about someone having a wedding and their shoes not arriving, and then we drove.
Was that
It was
it?
in Vegas, and we went to a different store to buy it and brought it to the wedding to
Not
ensure.
even a Zappos store, or it wasn't.
No,
It was just
but
any. It was somebody.
It was a Zappos shipping issue that caused the problem.
Got it.
In all
Yeah.
fairness, but that's the length we went to fix it. Is like, can you run to a brand that we won't name, a big brand in a mall, and grab the shoe and get it to the
Yeah.
customer? And like, yes, of course, that is the only answer to this problem, is to get them their shoes, right? But I think one of my favorite stories, and it's so small, and I love it because it's small and it was so impactful. Is there in a call center environment, or even in a like marketing environment, where you're sending emails to customers, you get kickbacks when they're out of office or what have you. And at Zappos at the time, it was somebody's job every day to go into that queue and delete, because these aren't real customers trying
Hmm.
to talk to us, right? This is just they're out of office. So get them out of the queue and move on. Well, one of our employees was deleting and read this woman's out of the office, and it said, I'm out of the office. I'm participating in the 3-day breast cancer run walk." But it was I remember it being like 3 days. It was very intense, this walk that this woman was doing. And the call center rep saw it. And instead of just deleting it, she grabbed a card, because every employee in the call center had cards right next to their desk, right? She grabbed a card and she wrote this woman a card and said something to the effect of like, breast cancer has personally affected my family. I noticed you were doing this fundraiser and this walk, and I'm just so thankful there's people like you out there, right? Like, that employee hand wrote a note to this customer who wasn't even a customer. It was just an out of office, right? Like, who knows if she had ever placed an order. She just was in our database. And the customer got the card and emailed us and said, none of my coworkers said anything about my out of office. Like,
Wow.
half of my family didn't even mention this enormous endurance thing I was doing. And a random employee at Zappos wrote me a thank you card.
Wow.
And that, like, it gives me chills because
Yeah.
it's so easy, but it's so not obvious sometimes that everybody just wants to be seen. And
Yeah.
we allowed our employees to see customers, and that was our metric. It was,
Mm.
you've heard me talk about it. PEC, personal emotional connection. How are you
Yeah.
connecting with your customers outside of the product they buy? How are you connecting with your employees outside of the job that they do? And so this employee connected with a customer on a really personal level, and that is success.
And that, I guess I'm tying it back, is partly because that person knows what it feels like to be the recipient of that kind of service.
Right.
They've been the product of the product. They've had other people do things like that for them, which then makes it easier to give to a customer in the way in which you just said.
Yeah, a
I love it.
thousand percent.
I love it.
We we've we've trained them through experience that there's no there's no way to go too far above and beyond for a customer. Even in our policies, like every employee in the call center had the ability to do anything a supervisor could do, an employee could do, because we
Hmm.
wanted one point of contact. We didn't want a customer to have to be frustrated and talk to a supervisor to get what they want. We wanted the
Yeah.
employee to be able to handle it right then. So that meant giving out free gift cards, giving out free product, refunding product that we don't ever get back. Like, that was all in their virtual toolkit.
I could see a startup saying, let's do it this way. And we start from the very beginning. We create the policies, we get the values, we get the people on board who represent our values, and we're up and running from the very beginning, and all is good. And then I could also see, well, we got a company where this is not the case. We don't have that kind of culture. We're not treating people the way in which you're suggesting. We're not treating our customers this way either. But I want to do that. I think that's the right thing to do. And so there's a lot of undoing. There's a lot of rethinking and convincing people that this is the way to do it. Is there
Mm-hmm.
any sort of suggestions you have for those people who are in those situations saying, I like this idea? Maybe it's a CEO, maybe it's a leader of a team, but they don't have what you have. You don't
Yeah.
have what you had, but they want to start that process. It's a
Yes.
dysfunctional group. What do we do?
I I have some advice, and the advice is it's never too late, and it's never too early. Right? Of course, it's easier to create a culture than it is to change a culture, especially when it's easier to change a culture at 50 employees than it is at 5,000. Right? So
Hmm.
the sooner you get started, the easier it is, but it's not impossible at any stage. Um, so the advice I have is you're trying to create a culture that is unique to you. So what I had, it's going back to healthcare. I was giving a talk once, and a woman stood up and said, this all sounds great, but my team works with patients who are dying every day, and I can't send a nurse in a funny hat into a dying patient's room. That's just not going to work. And I was like, yeah, you should not do that then. Like, you should not
Right. Right.
do that if that won't be the right thing for your customer, the right thing for your team. Like, we sold shoes. We were not changing the world. And in some ways we were, and that was because we weren't, we were just trying to set out to be good people, and do the best thing for our customers. So, your environment, your culture should be unique to you, and to what products you sell, what service you're providing, and what's important to you. I think it's that consistency that matters and how it shows up every day. At Zappos, our company was founded in 1999. We didn't do our core values until 2006. And by the time we got to writing down what our values were, we were already one of the fastest growing companies in America. We were well into hundreds of employees, if not thousands, when I started, we were hiring 80 people a pay period. That's how
Mm,
quickly we were growing.
mm,
And here is what Tony did. He created a list of kind of values based off words. He looked around and he said, who are the people I like working with the most and why? And he's like, they're fun, they're detailed, they're, writing down all the different things he likes about everybody he works with. And he came up with a list of like 100. It was an insane amount. And he sent it out to all the employees and he said, I think we need to create some core values. This is what I'm thinking. Here's a list I came up with. What do you guys think? Does this feel right to you? Are there things on here that I'm missing? Are there things on here that you don't agree with? And through the process of 6 months to a year, we got that list down to the 10 core values that we launched with. And the 10 core values we launched with were the same in 2006 as they were in 2020. So it worked. Once we rolled out the core values, it wasn't enough to just say, okay, team, here's our values. We did it. Get the plaque, put it on the wall, we're done. We had to redo all of our processes, and starting with HR, how we hired, how we fired, how we interviewed, how we rewarded and created the environment, the workplace environment that our employees were in. Looking through all of our processes in our call center to make sure everything aligned. And then we rolled it out and said, all right, this is it. These are our values. And we created a core values document that said it was probably about 10 pages, and it listed the values and then put into words how these look. How do they feel? How do they look? How do you know if you're meeting these values?
mm.
And we sent that out to every employee, and every employee had to sign it saying, I understand that I'm going to be, my employment here is evaluated in part by how these values look. And then about 3 months in, we looked around and they said, okay, we clearly have some thumbs sticking out. There's some people here that just are not aligned, and we all know who those people are. I know you guys, everyone that's listening to this call can think of the person on their team now or at previous companies that just was not a fit. And we let them go. And it was a lot. It was a lot of people. A big percentage. I don't know the exact percentage. I want to say at least 5%, maybe a little bit more, that we let go on one day. And we're like, we had been coaching them. We had been trying to get them to move in this direction. And then when it became evident it wasn't going to happen, we cut them loose. And that was a defining moment. That is when everybody was like, oh, this is real. This
Yeah.
isn't just a piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been in meetings, the two of us, when the CEO says, it's very possible that a third of you will not be here in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody goes, holy crap. And
Yeah.
it's true. We know
Yeah.
it's true. What I'd like that you did that most companies don't do is that the values were created from the bottom up. I mean, certainly, Tony, you said started the ball rolling
He
with
created
what
the
he felt.
framework. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
but
created the framework.
how many times do people create values in a large organization? And for sure, it's small. You got everybody around a kitchen counter table. You can do that. But if it's like a 500,000 people, then you could still do that. It might take a while to get all that input. You got to tabulate it. You got to find redundancies. You got to put things into categories. People don't take that time. So you normally get the HR person, you get the training person, you get some of the executives together. They come up with some values. Oh, we got to get marketing in there. So marketing gets in there, and the way they create the values. So those values are created, and then we pretty them up and we put them on the break room doors and we send them out and we create T-shirts, and that's our values, right? But we have
Yeah.
never actually engaged anybody else besides that top level in the creation of that. And I think that's probably where a lot of people stop, because they don't think that they have the time in which to do it, because they don't see the ROI. Back to that, what's the value of hugging your mother, right? I mean, there
Yeah.
is a value to do this, because now all of a sudden everything aligns around it. I
Mhm.
think that's very, 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 very important.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing is values are easy to stand behind when times are good. It's
Right.
when the money is out and there's a layoff pending and everything is hard, and that's when you see how committed you are to your values. And
Mm.
we had one of our values was build open and honest relationships through communication. We push the boundaries of being transparent within what most companies would do, but within like the law as well. There were moments where the law conflicted with our value, right? Like when, I'll give you an example, when Amazon purchased us, you had a publicly traded company buying a not publicly traded company. There are a lot of laws around when you can talk about it, who you can talk about it with. And so Tony said, all right, what's the law? And then what can we do within these confines to ensure that our employees feel like we didn't spring this on them, right? Like
Hmm.
how do we communicate within the letter of the law and still give our employees time to process this? But I think with layoffs, and we had to do them, that's where we were tripling down on our values,
When
or
you were bought,
in times of crisis.
when Zappos was bought, did the culture change?
No, it
Which
didn't.
is unusual. Tell me
It
how did that work? Because now you're part of a much bigger publicly traded company. Did they leave you alone? Did they say we don't want to touch this? We just want to we just want to support it financially, but we'll stay out of your way? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of really good planning and Amazon's commitment to that planning. So that one of
Wow.
the thing that Tony did when he negotiated the deal, first it was an all stock deal. So we still had a vested interest in the success of our parent company because all of that money was now in stocks of the parent company.
Hmm.
But he created tenants that Amazon agreed to of how we would work together. And one of
Hmm.
the agreements was that they wouldn't force anything on us as long as we were meeting our numbers and we were doing what we needed to do. They would open up their doors for anything we wanted, but they wouldn't force any of that stuff on us. And they stayed true to that was, even when you're working with a company like Amazon, there's 200,000 employees, I think is the last time I looked at it. Not all of those employees know the nuances of every deal. So sometimes we'd be talking to an Amazon employee and they would say, well, you got to do this, this, and this. And then it was on us to say,
Maybe not.
no.
Let me pull out
No,
this
like
little
our
document.
agreement is, in the night, we respect you so much in the nicest possible way, So, and
However,
it was, yeah,
yeah.
and it was a lot of just, you know, getting used to that. And, but for the majority of the time, I was with Zappos for 11 years post acquisition. So I had
Hmm.
11 years of
Hmm.
under the Amazon as the parent company where I could honestly say that most employees never even had any interaction with Amazon. They
Yeah.
were hands off. We ended up integrating our warehouse because who's better at running
Right.
warehouses than Amazon? It's like
Right.
let's
Right.
not try to reinvent the wheel here. We have an
Yeah.
expert, and they're our mom and dad, so let's have them do that. But customer service was our core competency, so we weren't going to move our call center over to Amazon because that was what our strength was.
Right. Right. I want to go back to something you said about values, and it made me think about some organizations that I'm working with, and that you probably have worked with, where people are promoted, people are hired. There's a culture of loyalty that seems to be very important, which I don't dispute that the loyalty is important. It's very important. But in the absence of values, I'm wondering how your thinking is about this. I've noticed that sometimes we hold on to certain people longer than maybe we should. We promote them and maybe we shouldn't. We give them more roles than maybe we shouldn't. We give them more control, better decision making, access, etc., because of the loyalty. Yet, if we had some values that we really embedded in our behaviors, maybe we wouldn't be doing that. So I've sort of seen this relationship between an overblown culture based on loyalty seems to be at the result of sometimes a disproportionate amount of emphasis on values. What's your thought on that?
I mean, I think it's hard. And I actually think this is something that startups face a lot is when you're in startup mode, you end up promoting that person that's there, right? So it's like all
Right,
of a sudden this person is now a VP. A minute ago they were a coordinator and now they're like the
right,
highest ranking person in their team because they've been there the longest and they're so dedicated and they are loyal and that works for startups. And then eventually you get to scaling and you realize you you have to hire outside of the company. You can't just keep promoting because you need more talent, you need more experience than you currently have on your team. And I think that is something that a lot of people face. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, we have this great employee. They've been with us for 5 years. They've starved with us. And now, how do we do right by them when we're bringing
right.
someone in over them? I don't know if
Yeah.
I have a good answer, but
No, and
I
again,
think,
I value loyalty a lot. I think a lot of people do, and I don't dispute that. I just think that we should keep mindful of the values, the other values that we have in addition to the value of loyalty, and that we put it into the entire um, thought process about how we make decisions.
yeah,
Because as my examples where sometimes we do keep people on longer than we should because of loyalty, and that's an issue. So some of these things are great, but they can also be sometimes our downfall. Strength becomes a weakness
a
kind of thing.
thousand percent. And that
Yeah,
loyalty to that one employee ends up affecting every other employee and just makes your values, your core values, whatever your culture that you're claiming, it falls apart very
right.
quickly when you're not
Certainly.
getting rid of people that need to be getting rid of.
All right, so I guess we have to close this out sooner or later. Otherwise, I could keep talking to you for the next 2 hours on this. But if there's something that you would leave us with, a tip, if somebody's listening to this and say, I like what she's saying, is there any final recommendation that you might give somebody to start this ball rolling, especially if they're in a culture that doesn't have what you have just described?
Like one piece of advice, I would say,
Yeah, just a
my
couple, maybe one or two.
okay. Um, you just have to start somewhere. I've had people say, well, my leadership won't let me do anything. Like they control everything. How do I serve my team better? And you just start. You just like let your team be the bright spot. Prove
Mm,
to the leadership that culture matters by being the best team in the company because you are caring about values and caring about your employees outside of just the job that they do. And then I think when it comes to putting a bow on it, right? The customer experience, the customer experience, the employee experience, and bringing those things together. I think what I've learned in my adult life is really, really hard, and
mm,
we should just try to make it less hard. Make it less hard for your
mm.
customers, make it less hard for your employees. Like we as people tend to overcomplicate things. Our processes make it harder for our employees to do their jobs. We Tony once gave me a role, and he called it roadblock remover. And my job was like bureaucracy buster. Basically, it was me finding out why so many no's were being said, and people were always being told no for reasons that sound good but aren't legitimate. And
Mm.
yeah, try to make things less hard.
That's good. Great advice. So, Jamie, what's up for you in the future, and how can people sort of follow you, whether it's on LinkedIn or wherever else?
I wish I was more active. Maybe one day I will prioritize LinkedIn over my family and my work and my extras. But you can find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with anyone who wants to. My LinkedIn is under Jamie Naughton Henriod. And right now I've been working with a startup, and I
Hmm.
was absolutely terrified to go back into the startup world, and it has been exhilarating. I love it. I love everything about it, and I love how complicated and crazy our days are. So if you want to follow the new company I'm working with, it's called Chapter, CHPTR. And I have gone from souls to souls. So from shoe souls to
Oh, very well put.
working in the end of life space. And I found it to
Yeah.
be extremely rewarding.
Well, Jim, I'm a huge fan of yours. I think they're very, very fortunate to have you. You are definitely a strong leader, strong thought leader. And I am so pleased after, I think it's been 2 years we've been talking about doing this. We finally have this conversation. So thank you so much for your time.
And if you ever want a part two, you just let me know. We'll do this
You
again.
got it.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newland. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.